Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing good. Today, I would like to share how I set up my Leica Q2 for street photography. Before diving into the list of settings, it's important to understand why you're choosing certain settings and configuring the camera a certain way. It's very easy to just copy these settings for your camera, but learning the thought process I feel can be much more fruitful rather than the absolute settings itself. When you're doing street photography, framing is very important because the Q2 has a fixed focal length 28mm lens, and in my opinion it's also a little bit wide. You always have to keep in mind about additional elements that might enter your frame, which can make it an amazing photo or even sometimes break it. I attempt to work in the mindset of set it and forget it when dealing with camera settings. Now, this allows me to be more attentive and aware of what's going around me on the street. By doing this, you'll spend more time learning how to frame your shot and not get too caught up with the technical aspects of the camera. So now let's move to the main part of the video. First thing that I want to do is turn off the settings that gather attention. Turning off the focus assist light, in my opinion, is the first thing I do in nearly all of my cameras. It's a dead giveaway on the street that you're taking a photo of someone when you have the focus assist lamp on. Then after that, I turn off all the acoustic signals that come from focus lock confirmation, shutter sound, etc. It's definitely annoying, and I feel it can also save a little bit of battery life. Next thing that I do is turn off the power saving mode. This puts the camera to sleep after a set length of inactivity, and the camera can be woken up by half pressing the shutter button. This I feel is a little bit sluggish and takes a few seconds, so you don't want that happening on the street when you need your camera to be ready always. Another nice thing on the Q series is that it has a leaf shutter, and shooting with it is super discreet, and I really enjoy this feature. But in order to save more power, I do auto power off the camera after 5 minutes of inactivity and turn off all the display after 30 seconds of inactivity. This definitely helps saving some battery juice. If you really want to get more out of the Q2, then you need to shoot with the EVF only. By doing this, I easily get more than 700 shots per charge. You can also enable this by choosing EVF extended in the EVF LCD display settings. Now let's move to the focus modes. I always use single shot in the drive mode, and sometimes when capturing fast moving subjects like birds or people on a bike or something that's happening very fast, I do enable continuous medium speed in the drive mode. But 90% of the time, I am always in the single shot mode. I typically use autofocus on the Q2. It's contrast based autofocus. It's not lightning quick, but that's kind of a blessing in disguise, that as it really allows you to slow down and think before pulling the trigger. I use AFS in the focus mode, and in the AF mode I use field. This field is like a small focus zone. The size of this focus zone can also be altered. You can do this by long pressing this zone on your LCD and turning the dial in order to make it much more smaller for pinpoint accuracy. I have enabled touch AF on to move the focus point on the LCD. It really works very well, and it's also very responsive. Only the main menu is touch enabled, and the extended menu cannot be accessed via touch. I also don't review my shots after I make them. That really slows me down and my whole shooting process, so I leave the auto review off. The Q2 also has a pretty bright 3-inch LCD screen, which is also touch enabled, but it's a pity that it does not swivel or even tilt. For the image capture settings, I always capture the photos in RAW format. The Leica DNGs are pretty nice to handle in post, but you need to keep in mind about some of the limitations of these RAW files. The Leica files are not that great for highlight recovery, but getting more details from the shadows, it's just amazing. So if you know this, then you can properly expose for the highlights with the Q2. I feel that the JPEGs also coming out of the camera are not great. I do not like them. I tried tweaking them. I tried playing around with the settings, tried to get a much more beautiful image straight out of the camera, but I did not like them. I really like the black and white high contrast images that is processed in camera. I really like them, but the color images are not for me. A few more reasons why I just shoot RAW is because of faster write speeds to the card when you shoot RAW alone, and also you tend to save a lot of space because these high megapixel JPEGs are pretty large and eat up space on your SD card pretty quick. Now let's move to exposure control. When your settings are matching the feel of what you're trying to achieve, this always leads to strong images. The two main things that I aim for when doing street photography is trying to keep things clean and simple, and also have the depth of field at the back of my mind. To do this, you need a camera setup that is quick and easy to use so that you can focus on the scene in front of you and not on your camera. For the shooting modes, I always shoot in manual mode with my Leica Q2. I like to have complete control over my exposure, so that's why I always utilize manual mode. For my street photography, I typically keep the aperture between f8 and f11, so that allows me to have many distinct layers in focus. Of course, when there is a low light condition, I do open up the aperture, but I never shoot wide open unless and otherwise it's really required. For the shutter speeds, I usually keep my shutter speed at 1/250 or higher. You want to make sure that you're shooting fast enough so that you don't miss the action and your images are sharp and crisp. When the light is pretty good, like a bright sunny day, I bump up the shutter speeds to even much more higher values. And finally, for ISO, it's very important to keep your ISO as low as possible, and I generally keep it between 100 and 200 because it helps me create clean and sharp photos with minimal noise. The last thing that you want on a photo is noise. In low light conditions, I go to a max ISO of 6400, above which the image kind of falls apart and the color noise is pretty bad. If you render your images in black and white, you can get away with it because this noise adds a bit more of grainy character to the image. There's a nice video about the ISO performance of the Q2 made by Octavian. I will leave the link of that video in the description. It's pretty nice. It's very informative. If you really like street photography, do check out his channel. I've always wanted to try the auto ISO modes on the Q2. I've tried shooting with it, but I've not been very comfortable and successful shooting in auto ISO mode. Maybe in the future I will switch to auto ISO mode and I will update my experience in the next video. But for now, I just set my ISO values manually. Apart from these, the Leica Q2 has several customization buttons. Number 1 is the crop mode available in the camera that simulates 35mm, 50 and 75mm focal lengths. I don't use the in-camera crop. They can be programmed to autofocus lock or auto exposure lock, but not to other functions. So this is okay, but it might be good if they can also be mapped to some other functions on this camera. The function button on the left hand side can also be customized. I have mapped this to punch into the image in situations where I would like to nail focus using manual focus mode. At the center of the right hand dial, there is also another customization button which I have mapped it to change my ISO values. And finally, there are very few customizations that Leica allows, and I feel, in my opinion, they are very limiting. But there is always liberation in limitation, and using the Q2 is a truly enjoyable experience. It slows you down, but it works in your favor. So you have to try it, and I hope this information in this video will help you on your street photography journey. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like button and do consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out and motivates me to make much more videos like these. So until next time, take care and bye bye.